Rick loses a point here because that's absolute that's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit.
This video was sponsored by Canary. Go to canarylabs.com or use the link in the description to learn more.
All right. Commenting on an Industry 4.0 Discord server discussion, take 0. All right, so Rick Bilotta, if you guys don't know who he is, he's recently joined the Industry 4.0 Discord server. He sent out a couple of DMs to me saying, "Hey man, I started this conversation in, I think it was the IIoT channel." Real cordial. Hey, not to rock the boat or anything. I'd be really interested in taking your take on your take. I have not been very active on the Discord server, say for the last 10 days. So there's been like a really long conversation going on in there. I made a conscious decision to sort of let the conversation percolate and see the community react to Rick before I comment. And I was going to go actually and write this in the Discord server, but it's a fairly long conversation. I thought it would make really good video content, and it'll just make it easier for me if I just scroll through it and comment for the community. And I think it might be it would be better, I think, in video format if people want to share it with other people, people within your organization or whatever. So with that, let me get started here. So, all right, so this is in the Industry 4.0 Discord server, which you can go to IIoT.university. I think it's /Discord to join. If you guys don't know who Rick Bilotta is, you should follow him on LinkedIn. He's a serial entrepreneur, type A+ personality, bull in a china closet type personality, real similar to me. He likes to rock the boat. He's sort of kind of a combination of he's a really brilliant troll sometimes, right? So he likes contrarian thought, and he likes to challenge prevailing thought and that kind of stuff. And we need those types of personalities, right, to avoid groupthink. So he's also started, he's a C-level guy, for other companies initially. I think he was originally a Wonderware guy. I think if I remember that correctly, I think he was originally with Wonderware. And then I know that he was one of the founders of ThingWorx, okay? One of the original developers of ThingWorx. Let me say this. I think Rick Bilotta in many ways is part of the problem. So while he's gifted and he creates great technology, he's the first guy, he's a guy who's going to sell his technology to the empire and not the rebellion. And so that, I don't know what Rick's mission is. Like, I don't know, is he just purely a capitalist and I just want to make a lot of money? Or do I want to do something bigger than that? Because making money's easy, honestly. Like, once you know how to do it, it's easy. But I don't know what Rick's mission is. So I've never actually asked him. I probably should. Maybe the goal is to have him like on a podcast and have this conversation. But what I do know about Rick is that he's brilliant, type A, contrarian, pushes through. My personal opinion, Rick's part of the problem, part of the reason our industry is the way it is, right? He sold his companies, was part of selling his companies off to people who their goal was to exploit their customers. And he knew that. He knows that that's how they are. He knows exactly what they're talking about in the boardroom. I'm pretty sure he was a C-level at Wonderware. And by the way, they weren't the least bit fucking interested in taking care of their customers. Their goal was to make money, and that's it. There's nothing wrong with making money. As long as you have an option to make money morally, you have an option to make money as a subset of a much bigger plan, or just making money is the bigger plan, right? I don't care for people who are in the goal, their primary goal is to just make money, right? It just seems too vapid. It seems soulless. It seems empty. This is why David Brooks in his book, The Second Mountain, talks about how all of the greatest industrialists and capitalists of the 20th and 21st century get to a point in their lives where they feel like shit about themselves, and they spend the rest of their life trying to make up for all the exploitation they did in the first 40 years. I'm obviously not saying that Rick has done that. I don't know that. What I'm saying is I don't know what Rick's mission is. So I don't know if he wants to be part of something bigger or if he's just purely a capitalist. Based on the history of he's brilliant development and who he sold to, he's been part of the problem. That's just full stop, and I'll probably tell him that when we talk in the podcast. And my guess is he probably agree. PTC hasn't done a lot of great things with ThingWorx. I have lots of friends who work for PTC, for companies that PTC has acquired. Very few people have anything good to say about PTC, including the people who work there. Okay. That doesn't mean that PTC is a bad company, but PTC didn't take ThingWorx that Rick Bilotta created, that was part of creating, and made it better. What they did was they made it a lever to pull customers into their ecosystem and then bleed them dry through 1,000 cuts. And that's part of our problem. That's part of the problem in the industry. And that's just a simple fact. Okay. I know that folks at PTC will probably be pissed off at me that I said that. I'm not diminishing the company in any way, shape, or form. It's more of a call to action, right? Change the way you go to market. Why the fuck would you partner with Rockwell Automation? I mean, I lost all my respect for PTC with that $1 billion partnership because Rockwell is an example of how not to do it. They're an example of how a big, huge company in pursuit of the dollar, the almighty dollar, benefits nobody but themselves. Even the people who have the closest partnerships with Rockwell Automation don't advocate for Rockwell Automation. Okay? And there's a great adage in life, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. Okay? All right, let's go through here. Done with my 6-minute dissertation on this shit. All right, so Rick Bilotta says, and this is in the, it's the IIoT, hashtag IIoT on Discord. So he says, hey, new guy here. Is this the place to talk about all the deficiencies of MQTT and Sparkplug B? Real quick, I have not read through the threads here, so I may say things other people bring up later. Great intro, great way to, introduce yourself. Let me say this: deficiencies of MQTT and Sparkplug B. There are only deficiencies in MQTT and Sparkplug B. The Sparkplug B deficiency is the edge of network focus as opposed to the instrument focus. Like, I would love to see the Sparkplug B standard be more focused on instrument as opposed to edge of network node. And I think that's the direction that the Sparkplug B working group will go. Because one of the things that you really have to do with Sparkplug B is aggregate data into the edge of network node. And while that's not a huge problem, it can be. It does make you think about the way that you're going to organize your data in the unified namespace. All right, so Mark, so let's go, Rick. Okay, so Matt Paris says, you obviously don't know what you're talking about. There aren't any deficiencies with MQTT or Sparkplug B. Have you even read the specs? Well, you probably have, since they're so short. By the way, it's good to have you here, Rick. Great repost, Matt. That's honestly the first time I read that, and well played, sir. Rick says, haha, great to be here. I hope to share and learn a lot of things. Let the games begin. So Matt says, I'll get the party started. An end user is hearing a lot of chatter regarding machine learning predictive maintenance. Company A has suggested to connect the end user's existing devices to their cloud service. Yep, that's move one. Company B, with different capabilities, suggests the same. Frustrated by the thought of vendor lock-in, he calls the A team at his local integrator asking for an on-prem data infrastructure that only requires one integration for the existing devices by connecting them to this infrastructure and enables quick integration of future services as well. The end user wants a proof of concept in 2 months. The integrator isn't interested in developing any hardware or software, so will integrate components from commercial off-the-shelf products. Rick, what are the top technologies implemented by products that this integrator should investigate? All right, Dr. Zimmerman says this is going to be real interesting. So Rick Bilotta says, let's start with one contrarian thought. Companies don't usually get frustrated by vendor lock-in. That's a myth perpetuated by, other vendors. Yeah, this is absolutely not true. I don't know if Rick has ever worked for an end user. Remember, my career started in manufacturing. So I spent 5 years in mining. Then I spent 2 2 years in the printing industry. Then I spent 3 or 4 years in steel, and then I spent 2 or 3 years in the tier 1 automotive industry. All we ever did was complain about vendor lock-in. All we ever did was complain about how vendor A doesn't support integration with vendor B. Or in order to, they'll say, hey, I'm vendor A. Yeah, why are you looking, hey, vendor A, who makes our PLCs or makes whatever. We've looked at this SCADA platform. We really like this platform. We want to use it. How do we connect your stuff? Well, the first thing that they'll say is, why do you want to use that SCADA platform? We have one right over here, and this is how easy it is to integrate it. Well, except you're missing like these 13 features, and they have those 13 features. Oh, and your development philosophy is X, Y, and Z, and theirs is A, B, and C, and we want A, B, and C. Like we're moving, our strategy is moving, our digital strategy is moving in a different direction, and that's why we want this other platform. And vendor A will go, oh, well, we can make those 13 features for you, but we're going to need to put together a partnership where you're going to help fund it. It's going to cost $50 million. We need $25 million from you, and we'll do the other $25 million. That's vendor lock-in. End users complain about it all the time. Rick loses a point here because that's absolute, that's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit.
Quick break for a word from our sponsor, Canary. Canary is the data historian and reporting tools to make process data easy. It's a single historian solution that works as well for your enterprise as it does at the site. Collect data, improve your analytics, and make better decisions. Go to canarylabs.com to learn more. Now let's get back to the shootout.
That's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. It's not vendors perpetuating that. It is the end users perpetuating it. It's the end users complaining, and it's because of the practical limitations of unified stacks, right? So, if you look at the Rockwell Automation's focus was, what did they call it? Can't remember it. They had a buzzword for it. But anyway, it was the idea that it was a unified stack in the Rockwell ecosystem, just the Rockwell ecosystem, right? That's vendor lock-in, right? You're stuck with what it is Rockwell built. And Rockwell's really not good at building everything in all layers of the stack, right? So Rick loses a point here because the myth is not perpetuated by vendors. It originates with the end user, and the vendors are the ones who grasp onto it to say, hey, they used it to say, we're not like everyone else. Here's a good example. Inductive automation, okay? Steve Heckman, who created inductive automation because he was sick and tired of Wonderware. He was sick and tired of Rockwell. He was sick and tired of Siemens when he was an integrator, locking them into their single vendor ecosystems. That's literally the reason he created the company. He didn't create the company to sell anything to anyone else. He created the company to build his own platform so he didn't have to deal with their bullshit anymore. And him solving it correctly by hiring these engineers from UC Davis to build it, right? And if you look at Travis Cox and Vanessa Garcia and Colby Clegg and Carl Gold, all those original people from the way back in the early 2000s when Wonderware was supposed to be taking over the world. What has Wonderware done since 2000 when the version 10 release came out in, fucking 2007 or whatever it does? They've done this. The number one conversion in the world for the last 12 fucking years. The number one conversion of the world for the last 12 years has been from Wonderware to Ignition. Nobody goes from Ignition to Wonderware. They go from Wonderware to Ignition, all right? So the vendor lock-in is what created inductive automation, right? And it was a reaction. If you act like the 800-pound gorilla and you do this shit all the time, telling people, well, fuck you, do it our way. Hey, I'm Rockwell Automation. I own this whole region. You're going to deal with that vendor. You're going to buy that product. You're not going to put that on your website. You know what happens? Other smart people, they don't say fuck you to your face. Other smart people get into a room and they say, how do we work around these guys? What do we got to create? If we're going to create a product that's perfect to go against these guys, what will we do? That's what happened in Northern California, in Folsom, California, and that's why inductive automation today is the fastest growing industrial platform in the world and has been the fastest growing industrial platform in the world since 2008, continuously. Okay? Vendor lock-in created that. It's not a myth. All right. Rick Bilotta says, also critical in the analysis of what to use is an inventory of what already exists. Of course, most implementations are brownfield, and even in greenfield cases, stuff comes in from OEM equipment suppliers. Companies have preferred suppliers and so on. Preferred suppliers come from financial incentive, not preference for that supplier. Okay, that's where preferred suppliers come from in nearly all cases. It comes from financial benefit. That the economics of industrial automation is changing, where that preferred supplier incentive, that financial incentive, is evaporating. I've seen way too many people connect directly to PLCs and other sensors and controllers when they've already partially contextualized the data in a SCADA HMI system or historian. Correct. Absolutely right. Makes little sense to add more comms load on the control level and another system to maintain, except where the point where I will disagree with Rick here. He's right. Where we'll disagree is that his premise assumes that all context and events that you need would be in the SCADA or HMI. So this is why treating PLCs as a node in an ecosystem and a SCADA as a node in an ecosystem, all with its own individual events and context, is important. This is why we architect it that way. But good point. So point for Rick. I'll also take a contrarian point of view on the need for cloud for implementing AI, machine learning analytics, and predictive maintenance. That's changing fast. There are some good reasons to leverage the cloud for this, but it's no longer as clear-cut a line. Even training of models can be done quite effectively at the edge in many cases. And in many industrial settings, whether you train cloud or edge, it's still often advantageous to train instance level or in situ models rather than population models. For example, you might have 100 of the same pump across 5 sites, and you're using a vibration sensor to get some insights on performance and reliability. Each pump might be handling different materials, be mounted on a different foundation or surface, be surrounded by other sources of vibration or noise, and ultimately instance-level training might yield the best results versus the approach of aggregating the data from all 100 pumps and building a unified model. I'm going to stop there. So what he's doing is he's creating a choice, and it's a false choice here. I would argue that you're going to train the models in the cloud and on the edge, and the delta, the results between the two, is context you need to improve both models. That's what I would argue, but his point's well taken. That can work for sure if you happen to get lucky with all of the other features and inputs to the model, some of which won't necessarily be obvious or easily measurable. In any case, we need to be flexible on what runs where. The thesis here, in any case, we need to be flexible on what runs where. Absolutely spot on. He's wrong about the cloud piece. We're not moving towards the edge for massive compute power. That's the mistake that most organizations made. You know, Rockwell, Siemens, everyone thought you're going to be having tons and tons of compute power on the edge. It's not true. You're going to the cloud. Everything is pointing in that direction. 5G is going to make doing that so much easier for so many more end users. Your cloud and edge both have a role. Cloud's not going anywhere. It's only getting bigger. Mark my words. 2 decades from now, the average manufacturer will have no data center. The average manufacturer will have no core. The average manufacturer is not going to maintain their own infrastructure. Mark my words. Okay? And that's an absolute empirical certainty. But good point here. What I would say is, what I want to point out, the where Rick and I disagree here is, yes, you can run models on the edge for certain use cases, and you can run models in the cloud, and you should for certain use cases, but you're going to be doing both. And one of the things that Rick is missing here is that where machine learning is going right now, machine learning looks at raw data, raw events in a data lake, and looks for patterns in those events. Right? You tie those events to some negative outcome in general. And then what you're doing is you're looking for a pattern that can predict the negative outcome, right? That's the training of the model. You look at all the data, you find that pattern. Okay, yep, here's the for every value X, outcome Y, we're going to predict that bad outcome. That's basic. That's the easy stuff, okay? Any idiot can can create a machine learning model that does linear regression on just a couple of data points predicting an outcome, as long as that data is clean and you are even a remotely useful data scientist, you can predict that outcome. That's the easy stuff. Where machine learning is coming into, where the real value of machine learning will be, 3 to 5 years from right now, and you need high fidelity data stored, and for all events across your entire organization need to be stored. Here's the real value. Number one, you're going to use machine learning to find the relationships that you should be testing. Right now, all machine learning use cases are you testing a hypothesis you came up with on your own. Okay? Machine learning's value is to predict what is the use case you should test. Okay? With high accuracy. And in order to do that, you have to use cascaded machine learning models. So instead of machine learning inputting raw events from the edge, you're going to input predictions from other machine learning models. Okay? So that's part of the reason you need to understand that even machine learning AI needs to be part of an ecosystem. Stop, Rick. You could tell Rick is like a C-level executive. He wants a 5-page executive summary. And that 5-page executive summary is, what's the use case we're going to test? How much is it going to cost me? What is the projected benefit? How long will I see the return? That's what that statement is there. Okay. And that's not that that's not important, but from an architectural perspective, you do not want to limit your architectural vision by the use case mantra. Okay. All right. Rick also says, I think of IoT as a distributed systems problem. In a perfect world, workloads could run symmetrically or in a location independent manner, cloud, edge, fog, rain, wind, whatever. Not there yet. And of course, cybersecurity, latency, cost, supportability, and availability issues all weigh into the choice of what to run where. Sort of. Yeah, he's talking current day. Yes. My take has always been to abstract the ugliness away at the level above the protocol wars, call it digital twins, asset models, unified namespaces, cyber cheese, whatever. I don't care. But the abstraction is critical to making it all work and play nice together and to allow value-added apps to be built on top of the abstraction. Yes, he's correct. One thing he's missing, you have abstraction right in using a unified namespace, abstraction right alongside raw, unabstracted events in the same unified namespace. They live together, okay? And they can reference and interoperate with one another. The other fail is that people often take too much of a data-centric approach. They often fail to integrate actionability, whether that involves calling services, methods, writing values. And when they think data, they often conflate historical data with real-time data. And they often ignore events, which are just a special kind of data with multiple bits of information in them. An event doesn't have multiple bits of information. He's probably, I'm not sure what he's saying there. And all an event is something that happened and when. That's all it is. That's what an event is. That's what data is. When we say data is an event. Okay. When we say information is an abstraction of that event, an abstraction of that data. Information is always actionable. It's something you can do. Data by itself is not actionable. An event is not actionable unless that event is an abstraction. That is a trigger that says this thing happened, and we have tied that event directly to a specific mitigation. Okay. So when we get to discussing options for infrastructure, protocols, vendors, and platforms, some are good at one aspect of this, but pretty shitty at others. It's a fairly obfuscated answer. I'm not sure what he means there specifically. He says the other fail is that people often take too much of a data-centric approach. There's no such thing as too much of a data-centric approach until you are collecting all data, every event, and you are unifying all events. Once you get to that point, yes, you can be any further journey down that road could be, useless data-centric implementations. Okay. Similarly, any IoT platform should have the concept of discoverability at its core. That means both the ability to discover from source systems and devices and level of namespace and context that it can, but also that the aggregate model twin namespace is discoverable and searchable by other apps or tooling. Yes, correct. Real quick, a digital twin and a unified namespace, not the same thing. They're digital twin's a snapshot. Unified namespace is current state. And whenever you look at a unified namespace at any given time, it is literally at this moment, at this moment, at this moment. It's the structure and the events of your business as they're happening. Digital twin is not. Digital twin is it's an abstraction, a digital abstraction of your organization. There are things that are left out. There are things that are added. UNS and digital twin are not the same thing. And lastly, I'm a huge believer in event-driven responsive apps. Sure, we might need to do some polling at the lowest levels of the protocol, but above that, it should support both pub, sub, and on-demand access. Long-term, I don't think polling is going to be a thing on the edge. I mean, and here's how you know. Like, if you look at the Opto22 Groove Epic. Now, that doesn't mean, hold on a second. Firmware layer, you're going to have polling, right? Because you're going to have code running that's checking I/O, right? I mean, so that's technically polling, just not over a communications protocol. It's board level, right? So he's right there. But I think above the board level, I think everything's pub sub. I think it's push event. I think the concept of checking for events is very much a 1980s, 1990s serial network concept. I mean, if you started today, let's say we just literally cut off, we literally we can't remember beyond yesterday. No one would ever think to poll. And by the way, people who are building new technologies, they're not polling. Everything is event driven. Everything is being pushed. I mean, case in point, Facebook Messenger. All right. OPC Classic was supposed to solve the last foot problem and unburden developers from having to write another device driver I/O. How did that work out? Well, terribly. We hate OPC Classic. I actually think was a better attempt than OPC UA, if I'm being honest with you. Ask the SCADA and historian vendors how much engineering capacity still goes towards drivers. Well, that's because of politics, right? That's because the people who have the most influence over the OPC Foundation are the people that Rick sells his products to. OPC UA tried to be the evolution of that and a lot more, but I think the long term, I think that the long time that it took to achieve even a modest level of adoption led to a good bit of technical debt and obsolescence. 100%, brother, agree. Combined with an increasing level of complexity that just wasn't necessary. That complexity was built in, not for value, but for the same reason that if I wanted to become a licensed electrician, the people I'm going to compete against are the ones who are going to approve my license. Same concept. MQTT was elegant in its simplicity and its beginning for the very specific problem of telemetry, but it clearly fell short in terms of interoperability. No formal payload practices, namespace practices, etc. That's not true. That isn't true. If we just talk about if we're talking about MQTT vanilla, yeah, you're right. The advantage of MQTT is that you can take completely unstructured payload structures and put them right alongside highly structured, highly standardized payload structures. Why wouldn't you want both options? What is the reason that you need, by default, to drive the standard? Why is it that you can't just say the standard is the option and so is just a mess? Because there are use cases where just a mess is the expedient route, especially when it comes to innovation. We call that unlocking potential on the plant floor. It simply sucked as a mechanism for request response methods and services. It also presumed the world was hierarchical, which it ain't. That's not true. It actually is. The world is hierarchical. All manufacturers do the exact same thing. Okay, they sell stuff, they plan to manufacture it, they execute the manufacturing, they control their plant, they control their production lines, they pull raw materials, they put stuff in the warehouse, they ship stuff, they invoice stuff, they get paid for it, they try to sell more. Every fucking manufacturer on the planet. That's a hierarchy. That is a process workflow. Every organization organizes the same way. They add different levels of hierarchies. But yes, the world is hierarchical. And I'm speaking to that as a sociologist. Okay, that is. Hierarchies are a natural outcome of societies. They are a natural outcome of organizations. They are a natural outcome of groups. It is. This is they're wrong. It's presumed the world was hierarchical. It ain't. It is. So we bolted on Sparkplug, which is also intended in its mission, but missed the mark on a bunch of fronts. I do agree, especially in which I talked about earlier, which is the edge of network node, which is device centric, is not optimal. Okay, but it was the right step in the right direction. I personally think it loses and hides some of the goodness in the way topic names and subscriptions can be managed. Agreed. That's why you can. But the beauty is you can put vanilla MQTT right alongside Sparkplug B payloads. You can put them in the exact same namespace, and MQTT 5 close the gap there for you. So now you can add in much more structure with MQTT 5 than you could with MQTT 3.1.1, and they can still live right alongside one another. I personally think it loses blah, blah, blah. I also think it's too opaque and chunky in the way it defines the pre-built topics and moves data and metadata, and not very queryable. And MQTT isn't the ideal medium for accessing historical data. Totally agree. No one's suggesting you should access historical data via MQTT. What you should do is use the topic namespace for the where clause of your query to your historical data, which is what we do all the time. So we kind of end up with a Franken platform when we go to implement real-world solutions. While I don't presume it was perfect and it had plenty of flaws, that's what we tried to address with ThingWorx Thing Model and the underlying protocols and abstractions. Here's the problem with the Thing Model and ThingWorx. ThingWorx was built by people who didn't work in the real world. Clear. Just like when they built manufacturing apps. When PTC built manufacturing apps, it was clearly not built by people who have to solve the problems on the plant floor. The unified namespace, the methodologies that we employ are all about driving innovation from the edge, from the people who are solving the actual fucking problems. Why? Because when we rely on people in the boardroom, when we rely on people who went straight from Purdue directly to an integrator, directly to their own company, and they don't have any actual real world experience on the plant floor, what you get are bullshit applications like manufacturing apps from PTC. Who the fuck would build an MES system that doesn't allow you to define your line states? Who the hell would build a system that says, here are the 6 states that you're allowed to use? Who would do that? Nobody's going to use that fucking thing. And what happened to manufacturing apps? All right. It never really got finished, and some good stuff got taken out of the platform, notably a very cool pub sub layer. No idea why they yanked it. You know full well why they yanked it, Rick. They yanked it because pub sub makes it too easy to use that technology with other technology. And people didn't buy your platform because they wanted to make other people money. All right. By the way, Rick, super smart guy. I'm hitting him in the face with some 2x4s and here stuff, but I got nothing but utmost respect for this guy. But generically, that type of abstraction, discoverability, and invocation access approach is probably where we need to head as an industry. I've offered repeatedly to get involved with many of the industry efforts in these areas, but they're all closed off to individuals despite what they claim. Absolutely agree with you, Rick, 100%. Which is, by the way, the reason we have thousands of people in this community who say, you know what, yeah, there's a limitation here with Sparkplug, there's a limitation there, but the value I get from an open ecosystem far outweighs the deficiencies, which, by the way, he started with, let me point out where MQTT and Sparkplug B fall short. What does it say to you? There was somebody who said, let me use this analogy real quick. I'm going to use this analogy. Somebody said to me, I was talking to an automotive supplier, we're talking about Tesla, and this was an automotive manufacturer, and there was a guy who said to me, he goes, yeah, but like Tesla ships their cars with, sometimes their doors don't close, sometimes they leak or whatever. There's quality issues. And I said to him, everyone knows about those quality issues. What does it tell you that people still choose to buy a Tesla instead of the car you manufacture? Now, do you believe that they're really spending twice as much on the car for a status symbol? Middle-class people? Of course not. They want to be untethered from your bullshit. They don't want emails from your dealers. They don't want they don't want to be overcharged for their service, right? They don't want to have to deal with high-pressure salespeople. They don't want to haggle on their fucking prices. It's like all the things about your industry are what's fucked up and what they don't want to be a part of. So what they're doing is moving to a completely different ecosystem. It's the same thing here. People who move to open architecture, people who move to edge-driven report by exception technology, they're doing that because the benefit of doing that is far outweighs the benefits, the net benefits of staying with the status quo, right? But I like what he said there. They're all closed off. They only welcome corporates, vendors, and academia. Fuck them. 100% agree, brother. I have a pretty clear idea of how to evolve MQTT and Sparkplugs and such along with a different concept for a broker and edge stack with an additional modeling layer to solve these problems. Okay. As long as that modeling layer is not deterministic and it doesn't eliminate the option to just send a mess of data totally unstructured over MQTT into your broker namespace, I'm all for it. I'm for additional modeling layers, but I'm not for one modeling layer sitting on top of a tech stack. But since every vendor, standards group, or whoever wants to defend their little fiefdom and can't see beyond that, we end up with these asinine debates about whether MQTT or RPC UA or DDS or MT Connect or Cheese Whiz is better. They're all good and they all suck, which is why we need a meta layer on top of them. Disagree 100%. This, I think, if we're gonna have a discussion about well, let me get the definition of meta layer. So, Rick, if you're watching this, define meta layer, and then if you're using the same definition as me, then I disagree with you, but maybe you're defining it differently. So Matt says, so you recommend the integrator should pursue Modbus? Obviously not. You're telling me that Modbus over Protobuf won't get it done? Haha. So obviously this is all tongue-in-cheek. Thanks for the thoughts. At the lower end of the food chain as an end user, it took me a while to get oriented to why nothing was making sense with OPC. I represent, so Anders G says to the frustrated by vendor lock-in, wrong. I represent, and vendor locks-in is in the industry I work is a major problem. It's an obstacle to digital transformation. Yeah, I mean, let's say Rick and I were having a debate, and he made that statement. That's going to tell me one of two things. Okay, I mean, that's a statement that really stands out to me. Number one, his experience is only in like a really narrow field of the industry. It's either that, or he knows that that's not true, and he's saying it for some other reason. Because you can't have a broad view of the industry and not know that vendor lock-in comes from the end user. You just can't, because it comes from the end user. It's driven by the end user. Rick says, except it usually isn't. Help me understand specifically why you perceive it as such, and perhaps we can share some ideas to mitigate your concerns. Rick says, and that's a fair ask of Anders. Also, is technology lock-in any better or worse than vendor lock-in? Could make a case both ways. First off, going with MQTT is not technology lock-in. So, and here's why. The underlying concept of MQTT is broker client, edge-driven, report by exception, lightweight. You don't have to settle on MQTT. You can marry together multiple broker technologies into one ecosystem, and it happens all the time. Like, we have many ecosystems where I've created a broker namespace in MQTT at the plant or regional level, but we move to an AMQP broker namespace in the cloud. Two separate technologies, exact same hierarchy, same events, same structure, same everything. You're not really getting locked in by the technology. I think the part to understand is directly underneath it is the concept of broker client. Okay, edge-driven, report by exception, lightweight. Okay, I would agree that it is really technology locked based on vendors' preferred protocols, but it can be very confining and hard to bend the curve because initial change is not the lowest cost option. Thus, the importance of an abstraction at a layer above it all. So I would say this. Let me say this. He's said this concept a couple of different times. My guess is Rick is already working on a product that does this, and this is his initial foray into it. That would be my guess. My gut. Say I'm in a room with him, and I'm getting the lay of the land. I'm going, okay, he's got a product or something he's thinking about. He's probably got a team working on it, and this is him making the initial case up front for this meta layer product, right? This abstraction layer above, and because here's one of the things. He hasn't given any of the details of it, right? He hasn't said, okay, this is how it should work. He hasn't said that. He's given an abstracted comment about you need a meta layer. You need an abstraction layer. But he hasn't said how that works in practice. Right? And so my guess is, and I would hope at this point in the conversation, Rick is smiling or he's nodding his head wrong. I don't, but I'm almost there, or whatever it is. But, I mean, part of the reason I'm rich is because I can read people, and that's what I would take from this, that he's working on something. C, what's your approach? C above rant. Probably best discussed live in a future Q&A sessions. Lots to unwrap. Totally agree. I think that meta layer component is the thing Rick and I should discuss. We should talk about. He brings up many valid points in the thread. Really, many valid points. I read it like it. I rate it like it for some new vigor to discussion. Okay. So Anders responds back to him about the vendor lock-in thing. In my industry, we mainly have 3 major monolithic suppliers of equipment. They all deliver best-in-class systems to different segments of production, but do not give us access to all or any, in some cases, of the information, the equipment, that we do not buy the entire system from them. And we do not want this, as in some stages of our production, we have to make do with poorer solutions, right? I mean, at the end of the day, manufacturers' competitive advantage is by creating best-in-class in their processes, best-in-class in their workflow, best-in-class in their systems. Vendors don't fucking understand that. I mean, it's crazy. It's like vendors would be better served to have experience in actual manufacturing. They would be. They would be better served to actually have the experience. I don't know if Rick does. I haven't looked at like his actual background. I just know that like I know that he sold a couple of companies. I could have swore he was like an executive at Wonderware, but we'll see. I'll look it up on LinkedIn here in a minute. All right. He says, your industry needs to change and the buyers need to make open access to a data part of the contract. It's not a technology or vendor lock-in issue. It's a vendor lockout issue, isn't it? And if the vendor can provide a solution, if you can abstract away whatever weird or mainstream thing or protocol they use, you should be good to go. That's a bullshit answer. The industry, it's not his industry, needs to change. You have to Rick needs to watch the masterclass where I explain how the industry actually works and how it needs to change and how we use our approach to drive the vendors to change. Remember, what do the vendors do? The vendors they're not responding to market demand. What they are doing is, and as a function of like a meritocracy, they're not responding to market demand. What vendors are doing is they are leveraging their ecosystems to funnel you towards some other new product they created. The market didn't drive the development of that product. They thought it was a product they could sell, and so they use the ecosystem to funnel you there. It's not people pining for the thing they built. They built it, and then they go through all the traditional stuff. Oh, we've got all these people with this install base. That's the opportunity we have to go try and sell this to them. We go and try sell it to them. We try to overcome objections and focus on features and benefits, and then we try to use financial incentive to get them locked in, get our hooks in them, and then we just bleed them dry through 1,000 cuts. Anders is right here. It is not vendor lockout. It's vendor lock-in. Remember, the goal isn't to keep you from using other people's stuff. The goal is to keep you to only use my stuff. Okay? Anders says, you're right, and for me it makes sense to get suppliers to support a methodology that can easily be supported by many. Then they can rather concentrate on building the staining machines in their respective, rather than forcing customers to buy shit that they don't really want. I mean, and I'm telling you, right, this is a huge problem. As an architect, you know how many times I come in after some other integrator or some other vendor, and I'm like, you didn't need that, or that. They just, and the customer doesn't know any better because they're not the expert. They're not the expert in the technology. The vendor or the integrator is the expert. And so they just get fucking, they get taken. They get taken to the cleaners. They don't know which of the license they're actually using. They don't know which of the products they're actually using. Customers end up with tons and tons of shit that they paid for that they don't even use, or they don't even know they have. Rick says, generically, think about a new type of enhanced broker. Okay, so now he gets into the the nuts and bolts. Generically, think about a new type of enhanced broker that includes both a pub/sub comms channel, such as TCP, UDP, WebSockets carrier, and a REST microservices channel. I think it's interesting that he always, he'll do like macaroni and cheese whiz, that he always adds in that last type of thing. And a REST microservices channel or channels over any protocol that makes sense. Yep, you're talking about Ignition. And far more statefulness and queryability to metadata namespaces and topics. You're talking about Ignition, Factory Studio, WinCCOA. Add an asset twin entity model that addresses more than just data, and that can also model the relationships between entities. Yes, same platforms. It also needs a type system so that it can identify entities that share common capabilities. It needs to also provide access to the historical view of this data. It doesn't necessarily need to be the archiver, but it could be. It should be scalable and distributable across network boundaries. It should support some form of federation and ASMOR, and it should support high availability. What Rick just described here is the architectures we design for every one of our customers. And if you look at our customers, Fortune 100, Fortune 500, you name a world-class manufacturer, and we design their architecture, and we designed exactly what Rick just laid out there. That there's not a new product you need. What you need is a new architect. Okay, sounds fantastic. Bring it. I can probably bang out the code in a week or two. I promised my wife I wouldn't do another startup. I'll just have to do this one on an open source project. I don't know if I believe that. I think Rick's got something cooking. I only hear excuses. It's called Agile. And if it needs to move fast and be useful, it can be done by committee or too big of a community. So Rick has drank the Kool-Aid. He is now a red pill industrial automation guy. New technologies are guaranteed to emerge. Welcome to the team, Rick. Welcome to the team. Now all we have to do is show you how we already do this. And we'll go over that with the new technologies are guaranteed to emerge, but right now for me and many others, the technology highlighted in Walker's methodology makes it possible for us to do this today and not as a dream for the future. Then we have to continue. So what this demonstrates here is Anders understands it because he's going through this process, right? He's going through Mastermind. He's going through the process of learning how to do what Rick highlighted. All this is showing is Rick's spot on in terms of his technological aptitude and his intelligence, and he's got all the capabilities in the world. I think he thinks that he's figured something out we haven't figured out. He's going to find out we're already doing what he highlighted. I mean, there's the people in this Discord server are the most brilliant engineers on the planet, and the veil has been removed from their eyes. Okay. And ironically, those technologies will become one of the other legacy things you'll need to deal with in the future. Correct. Which is part of the reason we don't do the technology lock-in that you were talking about. It's really what really matters, and Rick sees this, I think, already, is the broker-client, the broker-node relationship. May prove to be true, blah, blah, blah. Maybe 1 week. All right. So it doesn't look like there's anything else in here. How well do you... Oh, wait, hold on. So Rick Anders says... Just because I'm a little curious, how well do you know the methodology that I teach, that Walker teaches, and the concept of the unified namespace? Is your skepticism about using IIoT and automation in general, or based on how we take advantage of it in the methods we learn here? I know very little of Walker's approach, and that's obvious in what he's talking about. I think Rick he's come to the same conclusions I came to. He's just doing it 8 years after I did it. But I've been implementing this stuff for a long time and created 2 successful platforms that do this sort of thing. Lighthammer, now part of SAP. Why the fuck would you sell anything to SAP? And ThingWorks, now part of PTC. I mean, that just makes me want to throw up. I was also the CTO at Wonderware. Oh, my God. I didn't know you were the CTO. Systems integrator for many years, and I worked in manufacturing for a number of years. I've kind of seen it from a number of angles. I don't believe this. And if you worked in manufacturing, did you work on the plant floor? And if you worked on the plant floor, how can you come to some of the conclusions you've come to? I don't see how that's possible. But however, I guess it is possible. I wonder how old Rick is. Yeah, you couldn't if you worked in manufacturing. I mean, were you on the carpeted side or were you on the concrete side of the business? Because there are some things that you set up above that would indicate you don't know the the vendor lock-in comment is just it's a massive load of bullshit. I mean, it literally is a massive load of bullshit. That comes from the end users. It doesn't come from vendors. Although vendors do use it to sell their products. Blah, blah, blah. I've seen. Now you'll even get to see it from our angle. Nice. Well played, Anders. Okay. Yep. Zach says, as a systems integrator, I would get frustrated by vendor lock-in. I created a couple of meta platforms to free the data from those closed systems. And then you sold it to a company who closed it back up. I'm curious what your thoughts on Kafka are based on this description. Yeah, so this is a really good question. A lot of people ask, hey, Kafka, we use Kafka a lot, but primarily for optimization of time series data being streamed into a data lake. That's pretty much the only thing that we're really using it for. Zach says, very long comment. I think you went through the IoT. If you went through the IoT mini course, you would see that we largely agree on the many points you said. Would anyone disagree? I know Matt Paris would agree that the discoverability piece, we call that self-aware. Yep. And 100%. Great response, Zach. Zach, you'd be surprised how many people disagree. Generally, those trying to protect the status quo are those who are only looking at razor-thin slices of use cases for this stuff. We don't focus on the use cases. A very important point. What we do is we focus on staying in the center of the room because we recognize we can't know all the use cases. There's no way to know them. So, if the architecture you design can't work for every use case, then all you're doing is creating technical debt. Zach, I'm still not convinced that using MQTT as the pipeline for historical data, metadata browsing, and request response service invocation is optimal. I think the ultimate solution is an and, not an or. You're 100% agreed, and that's exactly how we do it. We do use the topic namespace in MQTT for a historical client to say, where do I need to go to get, when I go query this historical store over here, what do I put in the where clause? I'm getting that from the MQTT topic namespace. That's how they interoperate with one another. It is an and, not an or. 100% agreed, Rick. It's a good thing we're not trying to protect status quo. OPC already had all this, data access, historical access, event, pub sub. It's all there. Don't reinvent the wheel. And if you guys haven't had a chance, I would go back and read the latest white paper that Matt Paris wrote on LinkedIn about OPC UA. It was absolutely he eviscerates the OPC Foundation. It's awesome. Okay. Just they lost me with XML schemas for information models. Rick is definitely a believer, no doubt about it. What it is we have to show him, we have to demonstrate to him that this is already achievable. We're already doing it. I think he has some misconceptions about MQTT, or about what we believe about MQTT. Cheryl says, I don't hear Walker ever saying that. He's more of, hold on, I'm still, okay. I don't hear Walker saying that. He's more of an and, not exclusively this or that, pragmatist, but he can speak for himself. Anyway, I learned a new favorite word from this conversation, Franken platform. 100%. Thank you, Cheryl. Jeff Noonan. All right, my man here. So Jeff is the guy. He's the Libre guy. He's the technical brains for Libre. Sounds like you're describing an event-driven microservice platform that sports both the usual, but also MQTT OPC, but also has a full type system and digital twin, blah, 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 GraphQL. I think we might be on the same page. There you go. Well played, Jeff. I was waiting for that foot drop. Okay, so Yuri says, look at Libre. I think Rick is going to be blown away. Rick, this week is a real mess with some stuff, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Me too, Rick. I've been going through about a bunch of family stuff. Interesting read. Yeah, so GraphQL and what Libre is doing with GraphQL within a predominantly MQTT ecosystem is pretty impressive if they're delivering on their promises. I still have to do the deep dive. And blah, blah, blah. And it looks like we're at the end. Let me make sure there's no other. Okay, so now they get into a different conversation. All right. So in a nutshell, here, let me lay it out. Rick's obviously a brilliant dude. And he has come to the same conclusions the rest of us in our community have already come to. I think he has misperceptions about what we believe the role of MQTT is. And I think That's probably coming from the haters on LinkedIn or something. Maybe they said something about what we believe. I don't know. I stopped reading all this stuff a long time ago. But if you look at that, the money quote is when Rick lays out, hey, here's what I would build, that meta layer broker. Here's what I would build, that meta layer broker. He literally put in one paragraph what we already do in all of our architectures. So I think now what it is to further bring Rick into the fold, we got to show him how we do it. Excellent. So hopefully this was helpful. It was way easier than me having to go through. I know it's probably annoying, but I hope you guys appreciated this type of response. And I kind of felt bad, doing the live, doing the keynote address in lieu of the live Q&A. I think this will make up for the live Q&As because it's sort of the same type of format. Please, Zach will kill me. Like, share, subscribe, share with somebody that you think could benefit from it, and we'll see you next time. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
And now we've reached the end of the video. Thanks again to Canary for sponsoring this video. And speaking of Canary, did you know Canary Labs now is included in every FrameworX enterprise license? That's right, get an enterprise license with FrameworX, and included, you'll get a 500 tag count Canary Historian license. It's unbelievable. And if you guys are interested in that, we're actually doing a 2-day intensive workshop on Thursday and Friday, October 21st and 22nd, building a unified namespace with FrameworX. Check it out. I'll put a link in the description with a coupon code YouTube500. Save $500 off the ticket price using the coupon code at the link in the description. Thanks again, Canary, for sponsoring this video, and thank you guys for watching.